Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion on the road to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud success, managing security and complexity, sponsored by Splunk on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Juliana Vida, the Chief Technical Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Juliana, before break, we talked a little bit about this idea of multi-cloud and the complexity that comes with it. And you made this comment about agencies need to rethink how they approach security, and that's not new, but this idea of moving away from the castle mode approach. Everyone loves defense in depth that's gotten a bad rap over the years, and one of the things that I heard recently from CISA is this move, and they're going to use some of the money from the American Rescue Plan to really get toward the edge devices, really to get more security tools, sensors, collect the data from these edge devices. And I think that goes back to something you said, the end-to-end visibility. It seems like with all this technology we're using, and now that through CDM, for instance, continuous diagnostics and mitigation program, they're supposed to know what's on their network. So why is end-to-end visibility still so hard after all these years?
Well, that's $1 million question. It is true. It remains a challenge across the industry, across the government. As we were talking before, it was hard enough before the pandemic and before multi-cloud environments became de rigueur, to turn a phrase. But now it's not just within an environment, but across multiple different environments that agencies need to know where their data is, know what's happening from end to end. The phrase used to be, you can't secure what you can't see. Well, that's true. You can't secure it. You also can't manage it. You can't predict what it's going to do. You can't manage it as you would manage any other valuable asset. Would we be okay with our financial, organizations not knowing where the money is coming from and going? No. And we shouldn't be okay with organizations and agencies not having that kind of oversight, control, governance, predictability with their data either, because data has become as valuable, if not more valuable, than tangible financial assets, in the public sector. And it is complex. Now, fortunately, technology has certainly kept up. It has certainly matured over the last, it matures every day, but really over the last couple of years, the last decade. So the questions that the government and public sector used to ask about, but is the technology secure enough that we can trust it? Yes. Is the technology scalable enough to manage this huge agency? Yes. So a lot of those old questions we can kind of move beyond. And now it's just a matter of getting people to think differently, to be thinking about all the other aspects of what it means to have end-to-end visibility. And I'll touch quickly on the workforce again. Not necessarily just upskilling people and making them more data literate per se, but your actual security teams, they can't keep up. You've probably heard the term alert fatigue. One of my colleagues, who's one of our brilliant engineers in security, Katie Brown, talks about security's job being like playing a game of where's Waldo, looking at the screen and just looking for the red because you can't find it, or everything is red. It's hard to find what the problem really is. So you've got burnout, you've got, people are going to make mistakes. So when we talk about end-to-end visibility of data and how it relates to security, that's not just the technology that we're saying you need to modernize and bring your systems up to speed so that you can have better visibility of your data, but it's also the people, because humans just can't manage it anymore. The volume of data is just too great to put it on the shoulders of those analysts, and to keep them functioning the way that we need them to be functioning.
You didn't say the special magic words. I'm a little depressed here. AI, ML, intelligent automation, right? Predictive analytics. You fill in the buzzword blank here, and I'm kidding here, but really that's what you're also pointing toward, is that you can't upskill, reskill enough people. You can't hire enough people. So how do you go through the data? You have to have better tools. And obviously that's something that Splunk does, but a lot of other companies do as well. So how do you parse through that data to find the, if you will, the needle in the needle of needles?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And you said the words, I didn't have to, but I'm going to add two more in there, and that's automation and orchestration. So if you're not familiar, if you're listeners aren't familiar with what that is, essentially it is like running playbooks just like athletes do, in sports. Instead of the quarterback telling each person where they need to go, they run the play and they say, run the green play, or however they do it. And then people go off and do their thing. Well, in software, there's the same concept, that if a known security vulnerability is noticed in the system somewhere, then it automatically trips a play of automatic responses from the software. I mean, just imagine that alone, taking away some of that fatigue from the analysts so that they can actually focus on the stuff that maybe the data doesn't capture, or maybe that requires an additional level of human interaction of that just doesn't look right, or that doesn't seem right to me. There is still a lot of stuff that the human brain and the human psyche can do that these advanced digital technologies can't do. So let's give people the tools that can help them do what they are really skilled at doing, what human beings are skilled at doing. So automation and orchestration I can't talk too much about the value there, but you're right about all those other advanced capabilities. I will bring us back though, Jason, to all of those capabilities rely on data. There has to be enough trusted data coming in from any source, any format, wherever it's coming in from, but there has to be enough data coming in to allow those advanced capabilities to actually work. I often refer to the RoboCop scenario, when the AI goes bad, think RoboCop, when all the right data or enough data isn't coming in, then the system that's trained doesn't have enough to go on, and bad things can happen. So getting back to, you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, what having a data strategy or being able to, manage a data strategy that informs a cloud strategy, that cannot be forgotten. When we talk about these advanced capabilities, we can't forget about what the underlying asset is, and that's the data, of course.
That also segues well to the bigger challenge, which is why are we talking about this? It's not just because security is important, which it obviously is, but it's really the path that agencies need to go down to get toward IT modernization, to really transform the way they do business, the way they meet their mission. And that's where this complexity, the security, all this all comes together to realize really the bigger promise of this transformation. Is that starting to happen? Are you starting to see some results that agencies are driving toward?
Yeah, and I think that's because there has been just an explosion in the openness and transparency of agency leaders talking about what they've tried, what's working, how they're partnering with other agencies, inside agencies, the sub-agencies. There used to be, and there still is to some degree, a whole lot of siloed, my data, not going to share it, not going to help you. There's a lot less of that these days. And that is really meaningful, because you may not know where the data is flowing all across your environment, where it's coming from, where it's going to. But when you just start opening and trusting other parts of your own agency or your own government to share data and to be sharing best practices, there's a lot less of that old the finger pointing, which happens when there's think back to just a couple of years ago, before there was more modernization that's been happening in the last couple of years. So let's say that there was a breach at some agency. Well, what happens? Oh, well, let's set up a war room. Okay, then somebody from each department, mostly in IT or the office of the CIO, they go in that room and they shut the door and they all point fingers at each other. They say, oh, it was the network people, or oh, it was the patching people, oh, it was the security people. And they waste time and energy trying to figure out whose fault it was that could be used actually fixing it or mitigating it or figuring out how to, move beyond and, kind of get back to the mission. Well, when you allow a data platform and these advanced technologies we were talking about with AI and ML and automation orchestration, when you allow that data to do the work, we call it at Splunk, we call it finding mean time to innocence. You can now stop pointing fingers at each other because you can let the technology do the work so you can execute on the mission. And we are seeing that at agencies, and leaders are talking about it. They're saying, hey, we decided we were gonna, trust some of this modern technology, go into some hybrid multi-cloud environments, share data across our agency, and we are being successful. We are focusing more on the mission and delivering services to citizens rather than, bickering about who was responsible for the latest security incident. So it's been great to see people talking about that in the press, senior leaders. And also, you mentioned before, Congress is putting out more and more, there's been policy and guidance for a long time, but now it's coming with what helps and what matters, and that is real money. $1 billion is more real than $1 million in the government. And so those are all signals that public sector leaders care about this, that they expect agencies to be taking action, and we are seeing the fruit of that. And it's great to see leaders out there talking about the good things that they're doing to deliver to citizens and their constituents.
Of course, you're referring to the Technology Modernization Fund, which Congress approved $1 billion in, and now it's like a gold rush, right? It's everyone's saying, okay, how do I get my piece of it? So that's a whole conversation you and I could have separately away from this. One of the big things that we want to make sure we hit upon is as agencies continue to live in this hybrid world, what are some of the big things they need to continue to think about? What should be on the front of their mind? Because we know hybrid models, multi-cloud approaches are not going to change anytime soon. So give me a sense of not just the takeaway from our conversation, but what's your advice in many ways?
Yeah, thanks. I'll probably touch on a couple things we've already discussed, but this is kind of a summary. I always like to start with the people part. So I cannot emphasize this enough, that we really need to be thinking of our workforce, and not only upskilling the workforce that we have, but driving accountability, maybe making it part of people's performance, and how they're doing on the job, how people can be successful. There has to be an element of data literacy. There has to be an element of just a baseline understanding of how technology empowers every person's mission, every person's job, the way that government delivers services to the nation, to their stakeholders. Not everyone needs to be a data scientist. That's not what I mean, or a cloud engineer or a cloud architect. But it is way past time where it's okay for people to just say, I don't understand that IT stuff. I don't understand, what cybersecurity is. We are in a different world now. I say that it's like electricity at the turn of the century. If you didn't understand what electricity was, you could, stick your finger in the hole and kill yourself or kill someone. We're there now with data. And so leaders need to be thinking about everything that they do for their workforce, bringing data literacy into that conversation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, love some analogies, as you know about me, Jason, and back to security. Think of security as having brakes on your car, okay? Brakes on your car allow you to slow down when you need to, but they also allow you to go fast because you have the ability to slow down when you need to. Security, again, is it's not a super cool radio that you plug in because you want better sound. It is a safety mechanism, but it's also an enabler to allow you to go faster, do more, and then back off when you have to. And it can't just be the responsibility of the IT people or the office of the CIO. It just absolutely cannot. Weapon systems, food delivery systems, healthcare delivery, all of that can be taken away like that if we aren't paying attention to security at every single step in process, policy, and and procedures across the agency. So those are two. And then finally, I have to mention data again, but it's true. Data strategy. I remember 10 years ago when I was on the Navy CIO staff, and I had the data strategy team, and we used to talk about we got to figure out a way to make data strategy cool and sexy because nobody cares about it if we don't. And it was like boring policy stuff back then. But what we mean by data strategy is, especially when moving into the cloud, you can't just lift and shift your data into the cloud and then figure out later, oh wait, how are we going to manage it? Who's looking at it end to end? What are we going to do if there's a breach? The way that you manage that asset is what we mean by data strategy. The way that you control it and divvy it up and protect it and share it, that's data strategy. It's just, how do you use the thing? Because that data strategy is going to be important as you move forward into a more modern hybrid cloud environment. Because like you said, Jason, that is not going away. It shouldn't go away. In fact, there's going to be some other new thing, 5 or 10 years from now, and it's going to be beyond cloud.
Juliana, you gave us a lot to think about. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. So first, let me thank my guest. Juliana Vita is the Chief Technical Advisor for Public Sector at Splunk. Always a pleasure to catch up. Thank you so much for your time, Juliana.
Thanks, Jason. Likewise.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion on the road to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud success, managing security and complexity, sponsored by Splunk on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Splunk.